Diabetes Revolution podcast with Dr. Sarah Townley, the type 2 diabetes coach, clinical pharmacist, and mom of 6 angels. You don't have to struggle and fight with your blood sugars for the rest of your life. I'm here to teach you the skills you need to control and even reverse this disease. There is such a thing as getting off your meds and creating a future free from diabetes. And you can have it too. Let's get down to business. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Diabetes Revolution podcast with me, your host, Dr. Sarah Townley. And today I have an awesome topic for you. But first, I want to talk about me. So last week I had my ultrasound for my pregnancy, like right in the middle of ultrasound. I'm actually getting on to 23 weeks, but at this ultrasound, they do the full anatomical screening and tell you what the sex of the baby is. And so that's kind of exciting. So I thought I would share that with you guys. And the most important information that we received at that ultrasound is that everything looks healthy and normal. And that's kind of a big deal, right? We underestimate that, but I have had not good news before. With number 5, he had a severe heart defect that actually required open heart surgery when he was just over 2 months old. And so leading up to this ultrasound, I definitely had that on my mind, kind of in the background. But you know how your mind likes to drag you around and it likes to warn you about all the dangers. We talk a lot about that in coaching when I'm coaching my clients, but the mind is designed to tell you and warn you about all of the bad things that can happen, all the threats out there. And so I know that's my mind's job, is to warn me about things that could go wrong. And I noticed it doing that leading up to this ultrasound. And I want to share with you the way that I handle that because it might help you. And I was visiting with one of my clients last week, and she had some GI symptoms, and her brain immediately thinks she has colon cancer. And I know some of you can relate to this. I know my husband does this too. And I shared with her the same thought. First, it's good to hear it. It's good to hear the fear. It's good to hear the anxiety and all of the thoughts that are creating the experience of fear and anxiety. And recognize that your brain is designed to draw these things to your attention. And it's been a good thing over all the years of human evolution, right? But in our current society, we're often not in threat of dying or any immediate physical harm. And so sometimes these thoughts are counterproductive. And the thing that my brain will do is warn me. And I notice, the anxiety in my body. And I hear the thoughts. And I go, I see you. I hear you. And I understand why you're worried. It's very important. But it's not time to worry yet. When your brain is doing this to you, it's pointing out that a catastrophe is going to happen. You can, if you can believe it, after hearing your brain speak to you. And that's so important. I don't want you to deny yourself when something feels scary, right? Think of when your child would come to you and say that they're scared about a monster in the basement, for example, or whatever, something at school is going on, they're scared, they're going to get in trouble, whatever. We wouldn't just shut our kid down, right? We wouldn't say to our child, oh, that's silly, that's not going to happen, don't be silly, right? Because that's so invalidating. And so we also want to extend the same kind of compassion to ourselves and hear the fear and hear the anxiety. But if there really isn't anything to worry about yet, it's okay to tell your brain, we'll worry when it's time to worry, and it's not time yet. And that just might help you sort of put that on the shelf. You might have to take it down later when there's actually a problem to solve, a decision that needs to be made. But if there's nothing to solve, there's not enough information, and there's no decision to be made, it's okay to tell your brain, not yet, right? We'll worry when it's important and a good time to worry. So anyway, we got great news at the ultrasound, and I'm happy to share that with you. And I actually did something different this time because my number 2, she's a girl. She wanted to do a gender reveal. We've never done that before. So she had me give her an envelope with the gender inside, tucked inside and taped up and sealed. And she had to hold on to it for 2 days because the gender reveal confetti popper things weren't going to come from Amazon until 2 days later. So we ended up doing a little gender reveal at home, and it was so fun. And so what is it, right? It's a boy this time. And that's crazy because we've had boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy. So, can't explain how that's gone down. Certainly didn't plan that, right? I mean, who plans 7 kids, you know? So, I also wanted to share with you something else from this pregnancy that's really helped me connect to you. You as my client. I think of all of you listening to my podcast as a client. But the ones that I coach, for sure, I can share this kind of thing with because it really is a good reminder of something that I teach all of my clients. And the lesson that I've learned with this pregnancy is that going into it and having this pregnancy with the expectation that it should be a certain way, you know, like number 7 should be like number 6, really hasn't served me. In fact, it's caused me some suffering, some pain, because number 6 pregnancy was an amazing pregnancy, and I was able to exercise a lot and exercise pretty intensely. I didn't gain a lot of weight. I had pretty good energy and mood the whole time. After, I'd say maybe like after, you know, for sure after the first trimester, but this pregnancy hasn't been the same. And there's actually a lot of things I could name that are very different about this pregnancy. And the thing that I noticed I was doing was expecting myself to be able to continue to do HIIT workouts, you know, maybe just a little lighter, be able to maybe go for a run or, you know, just do some strength exercises even. You know, why can't I just do, you know, some squats and lunges, right? Because it's really important to me to stay strong. And that's been an evolution in my perspective on exercise, is just the importance of exercise for so many reasons, and not just for weight management, but for, you know, maintaining your muscle mass, for eliminating toxins and eliminating waste in the body, for the mood. It's so important. And so I wanted to continue to do these things as tolerated. But you know what? I just didn't tolerate it. I felt terrible after I exercised relatively hard, right? Like when my heart rate would get up, or I would just be working it, like sweating and, you know, just exercising intensely. And it's interesting because if you have a CGM, if you have like a Freestyle Style Libre or a Dexcom, where you can watch your blood sugar in real time change in response to a stimulus, I had that on in the early part of my pregnancy, and I would witness my blood sugar go up even when I was going for a walk and I was walking uphill in my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood that's very open and spacious. There are 10-acre lots, and a lot of them aren't even filled, and there's gravel road that goes up and down. And so there's about a 2.5-mile loop in my neighborhood. So even when I would walk, like, mind you, I ran 10 miles the weekend before I found out I was pregnant. So I was conditioned and strong. And even early in my pregnancy, when I would walk uphill, my blood sugar would go up. What does that tell you? What does it tell you when your blood sugar goes up when you're exercising? It tells you that your body's perceiving a stress, that it's intense, that your body is doing what it's physically designed to do to mount an appropriate response to stress. And even with a walk, my body was perceiving stress. And what I learned is that it was too much. Some of the exercise I was doing, my body was shutting down after these workouts. Like, I would feel fine during the workout, and then sometime later that day, and then the next day, I would just feel like trash. I would sit on the couch or sit in my armchair and literally not want to do anything, not want to get up, not want to make dinner. And I would sit there even feeling like something was inside my body very wrong. Like I would sit there and think something bad is really happening, like something is wrong. And this was persisting, but because I hadn't ever had this experience in my life with feeling bad after exercise, it took me a while to catch on. I would like go take a nap when I was tired, and I would feel worse when I would wake up from my nap. And why I'm telling you about this is because has been for me a wonderful reminder and experience that you got to listen to your body, even when it doesn't, quote, make sense, even when you think you should be able to do certain things, even when your doctor or somebody you're learning from has told you it's usually supposed to look like this. If it's looking different for your body at that time, it's really important to tune in, to listen, and to honor what your body is telling you. And we're going to come back to that message later on in this podcast, but I really want to get into the content today because it's a question that comes up all the time. I got this question when I ran a free Facebook group for a good 6 months, I would say probably early last year. And this question is, what's the big deal? Like if there's a spike in blood sugar, like is it really bad? And so we're going to get into the details of what that question really means and then what we know to be able to answer that question. So let's talk about blood sugar spikes. First, I want us to get clear on what I mean when I say a spike. It's really funny because sometimes I have clients that I'm working with and they are calling a spike a rise of like 15 points in their blood sugar. And that's not what I call a spike. So a spike is when your blood sugar rises after you eat, or it could rise in response to other things like we just talked about with exercise, intense exercise. So usually the things that cause a rise in blood sugar are going to be things that you ate or drank, right? But it could also be any kind of stress on the body. So this would be either a physical stress like pain or sleep deprivation, something like that. Or it could be like an emotional stressor, like talking to the insurance company on the phone. Anything that gets you really pissed off, right? Like somebody just like cutting you off in traffic. If it really, gets you angry or frustrated or upset, it can show up in your blood sugar. So I call a blood sugar spike anything that's raising your blood sugar over like 25 to 30 points from its starting point. And when we eat, this typically occurs around 1 to 2 hours after we eat. So the blood sugar starts to go up like 10, 15 minutes after you begin eating. And it'll generally rise until it hits its peak. And the peak can occur usually between 1 to 2 hours. And then hopefully it comes back down, right, after you eat. And ideally, like in people who don't have insulin resistance, you will see a return to baseline, like their starting point, within 3 hours of eating. Now, there are things that change when your blood sugar will peak. So people will be like, well, how do I know when it's going to peak? Well, of course, there's a couple things influencing that, and your body is going to be unique as well. So that's another variable to consider. But if you're eating something that's easily broken down and absorbed, it's a simple carbohydrate, right? And it's, in maybe even in liquid form, there's no fiber in it, and you're eating it by itself, it's going to rapidly rise your blood sugar, and you're going to see the peak maybe even before an hour. That would be like eating a piece of toast, okay, or drinking some orange juice. Now, what slows it down is when you consume these carbohydrates that are complex, right? They have fiber that is protecting the nutrient carbohydrate inside. That could be fruits and vegetables or starchy potatoes, things like that. Or it's mixed together with other things that slow down digestion, such as fats and proteins. Okay, so fats, proteins, and fiber are the three things that you consume in your food that would slow down the digestion and the absorption of carbohydrates. That's really good to know, because some of you are able to use that information to control how quickly your blood sugar goes up and how gently the rise goes up and then falls. And that's good, because when you spike a blood sugar and it goes up rapidly, guess what follows? Your insulin level. And for people who are insulin resistant, we do not want to spike blood sugar and we do not want to spike insulin. Okay. So let's talk about what goals would be for postprandial blood sugar readings. Postprandial simply means after eating. So in medicine, we have 2-hour postprandial goals. That means 2 hours after the beginning of a meal. And for people who have type 2 diabetes, there are some defined goals. And in general, you're going to see that they want your 2-hour postprandial blood sugar to be less than 180. People who do not have insulin resistance will not see their blood sugar rise over 140 generally. This is general numbers. It's really good to know, but I'll tell you this. If you're a person who doesn't have type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, no prediabetes, nothing like that, it's possible that you're still eating foods that raise your blood sugar beyond 140. That's really good to know. In fact, that's why I wear a CGM sometimes. I want to know when my blood sugar is jumping up really high. And it's really nice to know, when I eat a bowl of cereal, my blood sugar goes up to 210 and I don't even have diabetes, right? That would be information that could inform you staying healthy. So I think it's great information to have. And for my clients, I just ask them to gauge their peak, find out where they're peaking out at from baseline when they eat, and to eat to their meter, meaning that I want them to find the foods and the portions that do not raise their blood sugar over 25 points at its peak. Okay, so that's a spike. Now, what's the fear? And I hear fear mongering all the time, which, by the way, I always get skeptical of people who do this. I'm never interested in acting from fear. And there's a lot of fear mongers out there. And so when people are speaking from a place of wanting to cause people to have fear or having fear themselves, I always take what they're saying with a little bit of caution. And this is true for people on the web, right? Like in social media or whatever, talking about blood sugar spikes. People will say things like, those blood sugar spikes are wrecking your blood vessels. They are damaging your organs. They are, extremely toxic for your body. And I just don't know that this is true, guys. So let's look at the data. What are they even talking about? Well, we know, everybody is aware that high blood sugars over time do damage your body. This is essentially what leads to long-term complications of type 2 diabetes, right? Those microvascular, those tiny blood vessel complications like retinopathy, where people lose their eyesight, nephropathy, where people have kidney impairment and eventually dialysis, neuropathy, which is damage of the nerves, usually shows up with pain and numbness in the feet and eventually loss of feeling. That can lead to amputations. So microvascular means those tiny blood vessels. And then there's macrovascular. And essentially what we're talking about with those large blood vessels is cardiovascular disease and strokes. So there is a lot of research to explain why high blood sugars over time cause these complications. And essentially what's happening is a chemical process where oxidative free radicals are damaging the lining of these blood vessels, causing arteriosclerosis, causing disease, okay? But does that mean the same thing as a 1 to 2 hour rise in the blood sugar from a meal that returns to baseline? Right? Like, is that the same thing? And I'm going to tell you that it's not. Sustained hyperglycemia, which the A1C would help us really see, right? Because the A1C is an average of your estimated blood glucose levels over the past 3 months. The A1C would help us see if somebody has sustained hyperglycemia. And that's different from having pretty controlled blood sugars, even to the point of having normal blood sugars, like what my clients aim to achieve, with brief glucose excursions after meals that last 1 to 2 hours and return to baseline. Very different. And in fact, when you go into the data and you look, there is no research to prove that these brief glucose excursions even impact the A1C, let alone cause diabetes complications, okay? That's really important to note. Now, what goes up does come down, right? Must come down. And so when your blood sugar is rising sharply and profoundly after eating something that your body doesn't tolerate, that's going to cause that massive insulin response, right? So the body is going to try to control that rapid rise by secreting and pushing out a lot of insulin. And that is not what we want when we have insulin resistance, because we already have a problem with too much insulin around. We need to minimize our insulin demand. So we do not want to see these massive rises in blood sugar followed by these huge secretions of insulin. And also, this is what often leads to a crash, right? If you have a spike and your body pushes out a bunch of insulin, it's going to catch that rise and bring it down. And sometimes when it brings it down, it's going to be a crash. And that feels terrible, right? It can lead to cravings and hunger, and then you can just be on this roller coaster. The other thing that I think is really important to note is, how do you feel when your blood sugar does that, when it goes up super high? Like I'd say 50, 60, 70, 100 points. I mean, most of us don't feel good, right? We're going to feel foggy in the head, sleepy. Maybe we want to go take a nap. Our energy just tanks. And some of you might notice other things like your vision gets blurry. So when your body is telling you that doesn't feel good, this is bad for me, I want you to pick up on those symptoms and not just understand what's happening with your insulin level, but understand that your body is simply not tolerating this. Okay, so I want to make sure that I give you the reference for the article that answers this question very clearly so that you have, just some validation of what I'm saying. Because there are a lot of people out there who are going to say that these 1 to 2 hour spikes in blood sugar are, doing some kind of irrevocable damage to your body. So this article comes from the American Diabetes Association's journal, Diabetes Care. It's entitled Postprandial Blood Glucose, and it's a consensus report from a 7-member panel of experts in diabetes, endocrinology, and metabolism. So it was published in April of 2001, and I will link to it in the show notes for you so that you can pull it up and read it yourself. Okay, so again, what this article concludes after listening to many, many selected abstracts and presentations from invited speakers is that there's no clear evidence, no research to demonstrate that those brief rises in glucose after a meal translates to complications from diabetes, poor outcomes in people with diabetes, or even a substantial impact on the A1C. So it's not validated or justified to tell you that when your blood sugar spikes after a meal, that you've got all kinds of damage being done to your body. Yeah, there might be some oxidative damage in that 1 to 2 hours, but there's nothing that's going to prove that that translates to an outcome or a complication that we want to avoid in type 2 diabetes. Okay, there's something else I want to share with you that's really compelling. And I heard this on a podcast from Mark Hyman a while back on adrenal fatigue. He was interviewing another physician who frequently shows up on his show, and they were talking about this rise in blood sugar, and I learned something, and I was kind of blown away by it. And it's pertinent here, so I want to share it here with you now. So these two were talking about blood sugar spikes, and what was related was the fact that these spikes, we're talking about substantial rises, okay, in blood sugar. These are a perceived stress on the body. So the body actually can have a stress response when the blood sugar spikes 50, 60, 70 points or higher. So what, right? What's the big deal? The big deal is that when we have a stress response, we make stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline namely. And these two hormones are going to do some really important things that matter to people who have insulin resistance. One is that they're going to actually increase your blood sugar and your insulin levels. The other thing is they're going to direct fat storage. They're going to stimulate fat storage, and they're going to specifically instruct your body to store fat around the organs inside the belly, which is exactly where metabolic fat tissue is housed. Okay, so we actually will see people store weight around their belly and their midsection when they are stressed out because of these hormones and where they ask the body to store fat. And Dr. Hyman goes into discussing how he knows that this happens because he was citing a study by a famous researcher in my area of interest, which is insulin resistance, right? Dr. David Ludwig. He studies often children, and there was a study that Dr. Hyman was describing where he took overweight children and he fed them 3 different breakfasts that have equal caloric value, so the same amount of calories, but very different in their content, right? So he fed one group oatmeal, like the, instant oatmeal, the kind that the American Heart Association puts their healthy heart check on, which, by the way, is not very helpful and misleading because they charge food companies money. They charge them money to be able to put this heart check on, and they put their heart check on all kinds of things that are not heart healthy, such as they continue to put their healthy heart check on vegetable oils. I can't believe it's not butter. These toxic hydrogenated oils that I've talked about before that are so inflammatory and actually cause heart disease. So, sidetrack, sorry. This type of oatmeal that these kids got in one of the groups was one of these instant oatmeals, rapidly digested carbohydrates. The second group got steel-cut oats. So these are just not nearly as processed. They take longer for the body to break down and absorb. And then the third group got an omelet. Remember, these are equal in calories, but these breakfasts contain different amounts of carbs, fats, proteins, and the quality of the carbs is different. What they found was that the group of kids that got instant oatmeal had a rapid and pronounced rise in blood glucose and of course, insulin, which they measured, and also in cortisol and adrenaline. That was surprising. People did not realize that you can actually have a stress response when your blood sugar does that. And these kids had their blood sugars crash and got hungry and wanted more food also after their meal, their breakfast. The other two groups with the steel-cut oats and the omelet didn't have these rises in blood sugar and cortisol, and they didn't get hungry as quickly either. So that's fascinating. And I really want to point that out to you because it's good to know, and I really like to use it in a way that connects me to my body, right? Like this is about learning and listening from your body, who's the ultimate authority on what is or is not good for you. And so when you know that when you eat something that's really, carby and sugary and starchy, and it spikes your blood sugar like that, your body is going to have a freak out. It's going to go, oh no, right? And push out a bunch of stress hormones. That's not very nice to do to your body. And it actually makes the situation compoundingly worse because you're going to end up having even more insulin and more fat storage in the places that do the most harm when you eat these kinds of foods that spike your blood sugar. And that's how I kind of want to end this podcast, is just tying it back to that listening and learning from your body. Like, what is your body telling you when you see that spike when you eat, beyond that 30 points? Well, what it's telling you is, I don't tolerate this food or this portion very well. It's too much for me. I want you to learn to honor that, to learn from that, and then put that information into play, making decisions that protect your body from foods and portions that it does not tolerate very well. So if you know these things, when I eat these things, my blood sugar spikes and my body has a difficult time tolerating and processing these foods and portions. And if you're continuing to eat those foods, I want to ask you why you're doing that. This is really what I get into with my clients that I coach. Answering the question, what problem is this food solving for you if it's not hunger and nourishing your body? The answers to this can look all different ways, but often it looks like using food to handle stress or loneliness or whatever is going on emotionally for you. It also can look like simply wanting pleasure in your life and food becoming a major source of pleasure for you, and you haven't learned how to get pleasure from other pleasurable things besides food. It can also just be like cultural conditioning, the things that we've learned are, quote, normal. There's a lot of reasons why my clients uncover the reason behind the decision to continue to eat things that they know are harming their body. And in coaching, we're able to uncover that decision-making process and gain so much awareness around it, because you can't fix what you don't understand. You can't change what you don't understand. And so learning about yourself and how you've created a relationship with food that does not serve you long-term in reaching your health goals is going to be the very first step in learning how to create a new relationship with food that creates health in your body. If that sounds like what you need to get a hold of me. You need to get on my website, sarahtownley.com, and look for the Work With Me button. It's right on the front page, and send me a message. If we're a good fit and I have openings, I will offer you the opportunity to coach with me. All right, I hope you take that invitation to heart. I hope you learn something from this podcast that changes your mind, because when you change your mind, you change your actions and your results in your life. And that, I know, is what you deeply desire. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you on the next podcast. High five for tuning in with me today. You are getting smarter and stronger when you show up for yourself this way. You can get more free tools to help you control type 2 diabetes on my website, sarahtownley.com. And if you're serious about ending your struggle with diabetes, join my membership, The Diabetes Revolution, where you work with me in a community of people just like you. See you on the next episode.